for our second panel discussion about this Mass Inc. report. The panelists that you see from your left to right, I'll introduce them briefly right now. Dwayne Jackson is on the far left. He's the managing member of Alinea Capital Partners, a real estate development and investment company specializing in urban and emerging markets in the Northeast. Next to him is Jim Rooney, the president and chief executive officer of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, who also happened to have run the T at one point in his career. And next to him is Tom McGee. I was going to say Senator Tom McGee, but he's the mayor of Lynn now, former state senator and head of the Transportation Committee. And up next to me here is Crystal Cornegay, the executive director of Mass Housing, and she took the position in February 2018. So let's start off by just sort of taking off where that previous conversation ended. And Mayor McGee, I think everybody would like to hear what a mayor has to say about this report and your perspective as the mayor of Lynn on is this whole transit and transit-oriented development option, is it something that you see as the future for Lynn, or is it, as JH said, just one of many tools that you have?
And anybody that knows me knows how strongly I feel about transportation and transit-oriented development. I've been thinking about how it works, and I had a chance to go to Japan a few years ago to Tokyo, and I rode on the Shinkansen, the high-speed rail. Pretty amazing, 220 miles in an hour and 40 minutes. Amazing operation. But the thing that really struck me in Japan, whether you were inside of Tokyo or you were 200 plus miles outside of Tokyo along the rail line, was the transit-oriented development along the whole depth and breadth of any rail line in Japan. To me, transit-oriented development is a key. To me, the access points on transportation, a broad range of transportation, are the key pieces to what bring communities together. Whether it's the key piece in Springfield, how do you get people in and out of Springfield? How do you eliminate the congestion? How do you make a train station in the city of Lynn really a vibrant and viable option? Whether it be the cost that's really expensive, or you've got rapid transit 2 miles down the road. So what are the pieces that really allow each community to grow? And I think transportation, all modes of transportation that fit into this are important. And I'm really impressed with the report because it really does reflect on that. And I'll just, speaking as chair of the Transportation Committee, I had a chance to be all around the Commonwealth, whether it be in Lawrence and Haverhill, Newburyport, Worcester, and to see the stations there. And yes, the investments come without, particularly, I know Jay Ash talked about Salapoli up in Lawrence. But when you see the train stop across the street from those mills, and you understand that they're not being utilized, and you think about a 21st century transportation system, not a, and I'll say it, a 19th century commuter rail system. The train pulls in, it's a diesel, the conductor gets off, you walk up on the platform. That's not what's going on around the world. We need to look at outside the box and recognize that if you can get to Lawrence in 45 minutes on a train that goes 60 plus miles an hour like the Metro does in Washington, you come into Lynn and you can get on in Lynn and go right to Logan Airport at the downtown Boston in 20 minutes. Or you can get on a boat in Lynn and go from Lynn to the South Boston waterfront in 25 minutes. Those are the kind of connections that transform communities. And I think that what this report has been able to do is to link the transportation pieces to the investment pieces, and both ways. So you see the investment, and you're right. What's the chicken before the egg? If you get to the point where it's overwhelmingly boxed in or congested, then you have to make those decisions to make the transportation. So those discussions need to happen together. And I do think that the 13 communities we're talking about, the investments that we can make, looking at a 21st century system, whether it be with 20, 40 discussions, we can really transform what we're going to do. The opportunity for people that are struggling, and I'll just finish with this. The study talks about the people that live around the Lynn train station. The average income is $20,000. They're not getting on the commuter rail. There's 600 plus people a day getting on the commuter rail. They can't pay $675 a day to take the commuter rail. They're hopping on the buses if they can. the opportunity for creating jobs in our community, but more importantly, the access points to allow them to get the better paying jobs so that our community can grow and their families can grow is a key piece of this. So I think this report is really exciting. The Transit Matters report, the Better City report that came out recently, they all talk about the same thing. Access to affordable 21st century transportation is transformative for people, for the communities we live in, and for the Commonwealth.
Mr. Jackson, you heard Jay Ash talk about the little game he plays when when businesses call. He wonders how long it'll take them to mention the Seaport District and Kendall Square. In your opinion, are many of these gateway cities that we're talking about, are they on the radar of developers? Is the core being shut out and people are willing to move out to these gateway cities?
So, can you hear me? Can you hear me? So let me broaden my perspective, because I also serve as vice chair of the board of Massport, and I chair the real estate committee. So we oversee, and Jim Doolin is standing in the rear of the director of real estate for Massport. There's so many thoughts in my head right now. One is that the Seaport is probably arguably some of the most valuable real estate in the country. And we have no difficulty at all in luring developers, to our assets, number one. Number two, the role of government as a stimulative investor to both change behavior and promote economic development is critical, and Massport recognizes that role, and as a result of that, what Hirschman called social overhead cost is applied by Massport to create what he also called a directly productive activity, which is the investment by the private sector that will follow. I want to make one point, and that is I listened to the first round of discussion, and I found it interesting that there is a focus on the communities within 128, be it Malden, be it Chelsea, and pick another city. The reality is that those weren't an if, they were a when. They were going to happen by proximity, by changes in the demographic structure of major metropolitan areas. I'm from New York. I remember spending 2 hours going into Manhattan on a bus and a train versus those same folks who live in Garden City or someplace on the island that got to Manhattan within 2 hours or an hour and a half by the Long Island Railroad. Mass transit is integral to the ability to catalyze development in the gateway cities, and I'm saying that as an investor in New Bedford that holds a downtown piece of real estate with a project that has a $12 million gap, right, equity gap, and that I need to now reconfigure, redesign in an effort to reduce cost. At some point, I hope we can talk about ideas for alternative investment strategies, which I believe can also address issues of development in these agencies, but I want to be real clear that it is not a chicken or egg situation. The chicken lays the egg, and the government and the public sector is the chicken.
Money line.
So Jim, see if you can top that. So sort of the same question to you. You deal with a lot of businesses in Greater Boston. You've run the T. What do you sense are the gateway cities sort of a new frontier that businesses are going to start to move to?
Yeah, this is a conversation that Jay Ash and I have had several times when the prospect of development and location choices and some of those companies from out of state that he entertains comes in and he makes that bet with himself or has that conversation with himself. From my perspective, I think it is a strategic mistake to try to compete with Boston for gateway cities or other cities. I think that there's forms of development that lend themselves well to transit-oriented development in a gateway city, but for the types of relocations or business development or enterprises that want to be in Kendall Square or want to be in the Seaport District of Boston, The strategy should not or cannot be Springfield or competing with Boston. It's just not going to work. That being said, the elements of an economic development strategy are varied. Connectivity is a big one, both locally, as we heard from the last panel, whether it's the RTAs and help people get around in the region, or connectivity in and out of Boston if that's necessary. But there's other elements as well. I would advocate for several dimensions of an economic development strategy that include this connectivity, and I made a quick list here. One is, an intellectually honest assessment of the challenges and opportunities that the city or the region faces, whether it is crime or some other issue that needs to be dealt with. Thinking about erasing political boundaries, whether city, town, or state. When you think of Fall River, New Bedford, it's really a lot closer to Providence. You think of Springfield, it's a lot closer to Hartford, and they have more economic interdependence than certainly those cities and towns do with Boston and how they work together. Leveraging off of Boston, not necessarily competing with Boston. In this issue of connectivity, I think all have to be a part of the equation. So yes, the seaport is attractive, Kendall Square is attractive, along with medical area, but that creates other, maybe we'll get into this conversation, other problems for Boston that maybe, this kind of interventions for gateway cities can also help solve.
Mayor, I just wanted to follow up before I get to Chris, before I forget. Do you have the same, do you share his view about you can't compete against Boston? I saw the report as suggesting that gateway cities can benefit from Boston and sort of how that area is oversaturated, so there's an opportunity. How do you see that?
I agree. It's not a competition. It's a partnership. The opportunities that Boston is looking, and I think exciting opportunities that the Mayor of Boston is looking outside of the box, outside of Boston, recognizing that particularly surrounding communities are a key player in Boston's ability to thrive and grow, and also our opportunity to take advantage of the investment, whether it be Kendall Square, the South Boston Waterfront. We're close enough to really have those, be a partner with many of those. If Suffolk Downs happens to get Amazon, we're 3 miles, it's 3 miles from Lynn. I mean, so we really should be key players, not in competition, but in partnering. And I think, and I think Jim's right. We could be thinking about it in the Boston area, which I think is very important. And it's building on the good things that are happening from our perspective in our communities and working with Boston to make that happen. Whether it be Springfield partnering with the surrounding communities, the triangle out there, South Coast, as my colleague from Salem said, just always think of New Bedford and Fall River, now it's South Coast. It's a region, and it's pitched South Coast Rail as a regional approach. So that's the partnership that they built. So I see it as not competition. It's partnering for the betterment of the region we live in and for the Commonwealth.
Crystal, one of the points in the report is that many of the people who live near these commuter rail stations in the gateway cities don't take commuter rail. And you've heard some discussion about maybe the housing mix around these facilities is the problem. How do you assess that? And what can you do about it?
Well, Dwayne hit it on the head, right? It's two things. I too am from New York, and so it means nothing to me to live in Brooklyn and drive for an hour and a half to get to Manhattan. That's what people do, but we think about New York City differently than we think about Boston, right? People think that if you ride a train for an hour and 15 minutes, that's too far, and so you should live closer. But to think about things much more as a region would be helpful. And to Dwayne's point, real estate development in many ways is just a numbers game, right? And so he's got to figure out where he's going to get this $12 million from at a cost that works for him, his investors, his developer, and that kind of thing. And the idea that government is just going to subsidize markets that don't perform like markets is an unreasonable expectation. And so we've got to figure out, like, be strategic about where government is going to do that. In the affordable world, we have programs that we've seen that we've tried to do, that the SHARP program that Mass Housing did many years ago, and which we made a bet that we're going to invest money and that rents were going to go up, and that never happened. And in fact, because it never happened, it almost bankrupted the agency, right? They had to figure out a way to get out of those loans. And so we, you know, like, as you all know, I worked for Jay for many years, and so, you know, like, we don't create markets, right? Like, we sort of we've gotta work together to figure out what municipalities, what towns, what these gateway cities want, but you can't make a $50 million project work and think that you're gonna get $40 million from the government. Like, that's not a sustainable solution.
So, Mr. Jackson, how about this $12 million gap you have? and what are the real options you have in that situation?
So there aren't many. This project was 100% market. It was podium construction, which, for those who understand, is concrete and wood frame. I have had to not redesign, but to reduce the density, to reduce my construction cost. Now it'll be 4 stories and stick build. The relationship between density and cost efficiency is thrown out the window because one would assume greater density, lower per unit cost. You know, I'm re-engineering the project, and I will still have a gap. I think, let me just say 2 things about New Bedford, which is a city that I fell in love with from the first time I ever visited, for a variety of reasons: waterfront, culture, you know, beauty, cost structure, etc. In the mid-aughts, I was in discussion with Cornerstone Real Estate Advisors about, which is the private equity arm of Mass Mutual, and I was dealing with their headquarters in Hartford. The president of the Northeast region, Maine to Florida, visited New Bedford, and I showed him the portfolio that was in play, which was largely a waterfront portfolio, and he said, "Dwayne, you couldn't buy this real estate between New York and Rhode Island for the price that you're discussing, and we would be more than happy to invest in it." This was before the crash, and Cornerstone had offered to joint venture, and then the crash occurred. As Crystal said, when you're dealing with private equity or private capital, there is an obvious return on investment. There is no way that New Bedford can achieve it. One, because much to my dismay, I learned that my projections, and I will, in the spirit of full disclosure, Jim, Keith, and Pat Lee are former partners of mine, and so they are going to manage this project for me. I learned that income had decreased over the last 2 years since they took over a mass housing defaulted mass housing project. I think the point is that we need to do 2 things. One, we need to recognize that transportation is an integral component in mitigating the inefficiencies in transportation between these regions and the city of Boston, because it is a resource and we should be building on that. 2, we need to look at alternative means of structuring these deals through, for example, the use of pension funds in a participatory revenue sharing model, very similar to the solution that Mass Housing developed for the Sharp portfolio. I bought an asset within the Sharp portfolio. Great location. From my perspective, it's at the corner of Main and Main. We have a 50% revenue sharing deal, right? Where I drive revenue, the deferred debt that was a part of that structure gets paid off based on my performance. I believe, because I know how PE works, that you can structure within the pension fund, who constantly makes allocations for alternative investments, to give consideration to promoting, equity, housing in Massachusetts, affordable and otherwise, in these regions. They could be making an equity position, take a prep position, and take a prep position in distributions and a priority on size in a descending order, however you want to structure the deal. I'm saying we have the tools that are available to begin a serious discussion about how we affect and develop these cities, because in my last point, I know I talked about it, is that the gateway cities is part of a dispersive strategy, right, for housing. We are going to continue to see increasing costs in Boston. I mean, that's our reality. Capital One and the Center for Real Estate Development just submitted just released a study on, it's actually 17, on the future of CBDs, port city, not port, coastal cities. We can anticipate the problem of affordable housing to be exacerbated by the concentration of population here. We are not.
It isn't going to look like it did when I was growing up. And so I'm all about the dispersal strategy. That is appropriate, and that is why transit is important. But we got to make sure that we keep our eye on sort of equity and equitable development across the region, and not just have Boston be the place where if you didn't buy a house 50 years ago, you're out of luck.
Let me just respond to this, because no, it's important. My project is a market-rate project. The mayor of New Bedford, to his credit, has said, we are inundated with affordable housing. We need to balance the equation and bring in more market-rate housing. I'm saying, I asked my wife to move down there about 10 years ago, and she said, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, I know your wife.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that there are folks. I mean, you have the potential of a quality of life in a place like New Bedford, where I think people would be willing to move down there. I mean, you've got a town beach. You have beautiful Victorian homes there. I'm not going to do it now, but I could see a 40-year-old, family with 2 kids, and you know what? I can get a house in New Bedford for $400,000 in the historic district, and I'll spend the time taking the commuter rail to Boston over 65 minutes. I mean, that is the real opportunity for development within these areas. And one more point. I don't know how many folks monitor the activity of housing and the development that occurred in Providence over two housing cycles. When housing costs get high, folks start moving further south. They do it, they follow the train line. And I've watched it now in the 80s recession, and then as it built up to the crisis in 2007. That is a model that history has proven works, and people will move to acquire affordable market rate housing if they have, enough space.
Mr. Rooney, that argument makes perfect sense to me, that, if you can't afford to live, I live in Dorchester, and all the kids, the young college kids who can't afford to live in Southie are now gravitating toward Dorchester, and things are slowly beginning to change. But that makes sense, that if you can't afford to live in Boston, you might move further out. Is the transit and the type of service we have to these gateway cities, is it enough to allow people to work in Boston effectively and live in a house they can afford in a gateway city?
No, it's not. These are inextricably linked issues: housing, particularly Boston housing issues and issues of mobility and transit and access and the ability of people to live a quality of life at the same time enjoy access to workforce and employment opportunity. Boston can't solve this problem by itself. I applaud Mayor Walsh for his efforts in terms of creating tens of thousands of housing units. He's set a goal for the city of Boston. He's meeting it. But it's well below what's projected to be needed for the region. And forms of transit, be it commuter rail, there's no single mode that we should sort of limit ourselves to as it relates to fixing this problem. But commuter rail is one of them. It needs to be a part of the solution. So I agree with what my fellow panelists have said. I did want to, I don't know if this question is going to come up, but this question of pricing that was raised earlier, and I think is raised in the report.
Pricing of the commuter rail?
Pricing of the commuter rail and public transit in general. You mentioned my previous experience at the T, which was back in the 80s, less than the 90s, and I feel like I sort of woke up and we're having the same conversation all over again. This is a question, and this is a tension in terms of, what is the purpose of our public transit system? How much should the user pay? There's tension between the highway user, the driver, saying, they should pay a higher portion of the cost of the service, and what should be the appropriate fare recovery ratio, and issues of equity and balance. This has been going on for a very long time. The on-the-ground tactical issues of connecting one city to another, I don't know that they'll get answered until we decide what is our vision or what is our strategy for what our transportation system is supposed to do. And if it's supposed to provide this economic development, provide environmental benefits, and do those sorts of things, then yes, there will be pricing advantages to incent these things to happen. If, on the other hand, we're going to take the position that those people that are riding buses and trains ought to pay their fair share or more of it, then we're going to create pricing that doesn't stimulate the kind of activity that we're going to have today. I've been in this conversation for over 30 years, and this has not been reconciled, and we're talking about it again.
So I just want to make sure I understand, are you sort of saying fares should be lowered to create the proper incentive?
What we proposed a long time ago, and I think it's still relevant today, is that the T has a mission, which is to provide service and to price at a certain point. And then there's other social or economic purposes that are in play in the question, and I think Secretary Pollack raised this, is being considered in other places. If we determine that elderly should pay less, there should be some forms of means testing, we want students to pay less, that we have those objectives. Is the transportation agency the right organization to be in the business of implementing those, or should the T charge its fare and be subsidized by the groups that are trying to incent those other public purposes? So, for example, if putting children on public transportation to get to school, should it be the education system? If it's elderly, should it be someone there? If it's economic development, should it be the economic development agencies in the cities and towns? That's the conversation going on in the city, because what you leave Stephanie Pollack and the transit people with, and by the way, she didn't say this, but a commuter rail ride is the most subsidized ride in the system right now already. If you leave it just up to them, she's got a gap. There's no way that she's going to sort of get out of it. So if you have other objectives, should those other objectives be brought to bear on the pricing conversation?
Mr. McGee, what do you think about that as a former legislator? It sounds like he's saying the state needs to pump more money into the system.
Well, if you look at every state in the country, the reality of investment in transportation is limited. You can read the same stories no matter what state you pick in terms of the investment and the challenge to find the dollars and what that means. I touched the third rail last year, and I got in the middle of the campaign, was really inundated with angry people but we need to think outside the box and finally come to a place where we find the investment we need to make. And it's a challenge to say, well, we're going to get it on the education side, because my colleagues in mayors understand that we're underfunding that by $2 billion in terms of foundation budget. So finding it in cities is not going to find the money there. The reality is we have to understand that the most subsidized mode of transportation is cars. So, and that's the reality. I proposed, and with support from others, taking looking at how do we fund this, and every state's dealing with it, and the federal government's trying to find a way. And Jim's right, talking about it for probably all of our lifetimes. I think it's my opinion, but I think we need to look to broad-based tolling. And I think I supported creating a metropolitan transportation network that would toll from the whole 128 area from Peabody to Braintree and all-inclusive, toll all those roads at a reasonable price, and put all the dollars into all modes of transportation. So that you take care of the roads, you take care of the subways, you take care of water transportation, buses, and then we can build a plan on where we need to go. Because I feel very strongly about this, and we've talked about it on this panel and others. If you can't get anywhere to where the jobs are, then you're not going to see investment from people that want to help those people get to places where the jobs are. And the money, and there's always going to be challenges about how we get the investment into the gateway cities. Until we get our hands around a real transportation strategy. And if we look at Massachusetts, I really think we are a small state. If we thought we wanted to be a model for the country and came up with a way to fund it and did tolling in a reasonable way, some areas are tolled, most aren't. I really believe we could find a plan that would access real rail connections, 21st rail connections throughout the Commonwealth for the different needs of those areas, whether it be regional like they've done up in the Pioneer Valley from Springfield to Holyoke to Northampton, whether it be taking a look outside and electrifying all the commuter rail lines here and making it work like it does in Europe, so you get on the train, you have headway for all these communities, and you get in and out and find the jobs. And Boston will have that access point to find those housing potential for what they need for their workforce. So it's where do we get the money, how do we think outside the box, and where do we get the political will to find the money to make that happen. And I totally agree. The chicken has to lay the egg. I agree with that. And the chicken is finding the money and the political will to get past people that think they've already paid for transportation. We have not paid for transportation. We need to pay for it every day.
I just want to amend and agree with the mayor that if the public policy decision is made that no, the cities, towns, the education system, and others should not be providing the subsidy, then we need to accept the fact that the T has to do it. So, you can't have both, all of them saying, I have a problem. Martin Luther King didn't say in his famous speech, I have a problem. He said, I have a vision, right? So, if we're going to create a vision of sort of 4 gateway cities and for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we can't all walk around saying, I have a problem. We have to create the vision and figure out a way to sort of get there.
So I'd like to open it up for questions at this point. We got microphones coming? Good.
While we're waiting, can I just, as a preamble, I would like to posit an analog at Massport and think about this as you ask your question, what the role of government is. The port, as I indicated, we control probably arguably some of the most valuable real estate in the country. It is divided between commercial uses and industrial uses. Our port represents $16 billion in regional activity. Our cruise ship line continues to grow. The business line is growing tremendously. Massport had the opportunity, we want to ensure that there are blue-collar jobs in our seaport area. We were controlling 40 acres of land, which could have been all converted to, tech companies and, high-value real estate assets. We made a conscious decision to underwrite the creation of a seafood agglomeration based on research that showed us that the strategic benefit of that location within this region was its proximity to the airport. So we have this saying that the lobster you eat in California was caught in Maine that morning because it is processed in an 8-hour shift. We lose money on that transaction, but we continue to grow the industrial base in the seaport area. We are losing money. I repeat, we are losing money. So what's the difference between losing money to promote development in gateway cities and Massport's decision to subsidize land costs to promote jobs, in the seaport, blue-collar jobs in the seaport district now? That's just for your definition. Jim just said that it depends on your definition of success. Thank you.
All right. Yes, over here.
Not to get too close. Okay, got it. I'm Marty Jones, and I don't really want to belabor this chicken and egg analogy, but I think there's a third part of this we haven't talked about. Maybe it's the rooster. And it's really the piece that's missing in a lot of these areas next to transit and gateway cities is a vibrancy of the district. And I think that vibrant streetscapes and storefronts are really the thing that attract both residents, employers, and employees to areas, in addition to transit and housing. So I'm interested in your perspective, both as local officials, business leaders, developers, and lenders, about what you think you all can do to help that piece, to encourage the vibrancy, to make sure the commercial space that gets built in these buildings is actually occupied and adds to the vibrancy of the district, which can help it grow.
Anyone feel like taking that?
Look, I got a big mouth, so I will say that first, pleasure to meet you finally, Marty. Your reputation precedes you. Certain cities, look, as I said, I have had this love affair with New Bedford since 1997. Purchased a downtown site because Bill Well had discussed the possibility of the commuter rail back then. It was a strategic decision because I had experienced and took advantage of the relocation of the Orange Line to the Southwest Corridor. I moved into Roxbury with my family in '78 because I worked on that district and had studies from UMTA in the 1970s that said that real estate values would increase in concentric circles around station areas. So following that logic and the fact that they began to move fast ferry service to the Vineyard, where we have a home, and its proximity and efficiency, I made that investment. New Bedford offers culture with the Z. It offers quality of life, a low cost structure, beaches, surrounded by Fairhaven and Dartmouth, South Dartmouth in particular, in Peyton Arrow. These are high income, very affluent communities, and New Bedford is the repository for all of the affordable housing. Both mayors, from Scott Lang to John Mitchell, have consistently attempted to spur or catalyze development in those cities. One might question my wisdom, but there are folks like me who have expressed an interest in investing in New Bedford, and we can't make the numbers work. So it's not an issue of will or desire. There is a recognition that New Bedford and Fall River do not hold the same sense of value as a destination as defined by investment in transportation and possibly other facilities or investment. To warrant the level of investment, financial investment that's sustainable and makes economic sense. I want to eliminate this perception that there is no interest in these cities and that they are lying dormant. There are folks that are waiting. Lawrence, I've been to Lawrence. That are interested in developing in these communities, but the foundation, if you will, has not been established for those investments to be made in a prudent fashion.
I'd like just to speak to that. I think the arts, doing something separate is a key as well. The vibrancy, I think, is in all these gateway city communities. It's reinventing it or recapturing it in many ways, and I know that's happening in many of the gateway cities. My sister lives in New Bedford, has a place in New Bedford, so I know the excitement that's going on down there. I know Mayor Rivera very well, Lawrence. And in Lynn, we have embraced the arts and culture. We created an arts and cultural district. The transportation hasn't changed, the dynamics, the demographics haven't changed, but our diversity and our ability to embrace the arts and culture has been transformative. We had our first food truck emporium the other day. We had hundreds and hundreds of people in the downtown area that no one would ever believe had happened. Murals festival, all kinds of things going on. So that is a piece. It's discovering, or rediscovering, not discovering, what we have in our communities and recognizing the beauty in all of these gateway cities, which we all share, and it is a piece of it. So it's there are several parts, but it's again, it gets back to how do you get more people in and how do you make it happen to see what we actually have as exciting opportunities.
Yes, sir. Right here. Yes.
My name is Matt Rivera, and I'm just wondering about how we can help improve and strengthen the local economies in the gateway cities. A lot of the talk on economic development is focused around attracting out-of-state companies, and they want property tax abatements, which is good for the state, not always good for the city that they locate in. And so how can we focus how do we improve local entrepreneurship? UMass Amherst is right near Springfield and Holyoke and Chicopee. UMass Dartmouth is right near New Bedford. UMass Lowell is in Lowell. But if they produce entrepreneurs or the professors produce research that gets into technology transfer, they end up in Boston or Worcester or Kendall Square.
Jim, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, one of the strategies, and I agree with you that as a gateway city or a region takes inventory of its advantages, certainly the academic institutions, the proximity to academic institutions and talent and entrepreneurship is one of those elements of advantage. As it relates to sort of providing that forum, there's a number of places, and I can't rattle them off the top of my head, but that have been mimicked in some of those cities and towns that provide these sort of low-cost shared workspace that emerged in Boston, like WeWorks and other places like that. And I know WeWorks itself is expanding. I think these sort of incubator types of spaces, and if there's underutilized physical facilities in these gateway towns, maybe that's an early use. I can tell you, and it happened in the South Boston waterfront. You may find that odd to believe that Mass Challenge actually started on fanfare in a building before sort of what you see there today existed. Now, of course, they knew that their time horizon was limited because of plans for fanfare. But that in and of itself created a sense of energy, and then it got named the Innovation District of Boston, and the rest is history. So I think matching what you're talking about in terms of this need for space for the entrepreneurs to grow their business, along with this availability of underutilized space, is probably a decent thing to consider.
Yes, sir, right over there.
Okay. My name is Alberto Calvo, and I'm an entrepreneur. And my objective is to put 13 stores, one in each of these cities. Food stores that cater to the growing population of the state, which are the Hispanic population. The next one in sight is Major Rivera's, because there's 90% or something Latinos there. Yeah. And we have a small store in Chelsea, 7,000 square feet, and we attract 10,000 customers a week. And we are less than a mile from Market Basket, the largest So what I'm saying is to take the thought that Jay Ash said, let's look at our assets in these cities. And I belong to the Chelsea Chamber of Commerce and the North Shore Latino Business Association that has 300 businesses. And these organizations are scraping by. They're not getting any resources from the state or the city to advance the economic advancement of these small entrepreneurs that are making these cities thrive. Chelsea is an example. Tom Ambrosino, I think he's left or was here. He's focusing on Broadway in Chelsea, which you go out and every single storefront is a Latino store. So that's my case. And I would like to, I belong to the Business Equity Initiative from Eastern Bank. And they're helping me to put 13 stores in this city. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question, I think. Yes, right back here. He's coming.
John Kuiper, Massachusetts Sierra Club. Repeatedly, folks in the panels have spoken about the need to transform our commuter rail system into a regional rail system. There are two indispensable aspects of requirements to do that. Of course, we mentioned electrification, but the other major move would be to link North Station and South Station. That would allow for more flexible transit use through the metropolitan area. It would allow people in Brockton to go to work in Wilmington or Woburn, and people in Salem to go to work in Natick, without having to drive. That would be a major improvement to our system, and it is the current proposal to expand South Station as a stub-in terminal is fundamentally flawed. It's operationally extremely inefficient to have trains come in and go back out again, deadhead out. And they also planning to a smaller expansion of North Station, which will have the same problem. It is something we really need to talk about. Thank you.
I wanted to thank our panelists for their discussion today, and I wanted, are you going to conclude?